Hi everyone, welcome to the Avon Book Festival. Thank you so much for tuning in to join us. It's a beautiful sunny day here in London. We are all staying safe and we're staying inside. And what better way to begin the afternoon than with a Q&A with one of our country's best crime writers. A quick note before we start. At Avon, we pride ourselves on being a home to lots of fantastic authors and readers, and we are on the hunt for more. If you would like to become part of the Avon family, we are now accepting open submissions, and you can find all the details on our website, which is www.avonbooks.co.uk. So if you think you have a book in you, we would like you've all come along today to meet C.L. Taylor. So with that, I would like to introduce Callie. Callie, an award-winning bestselling author, 7 books. She has also written 2 young. Sorry, I have no idea what happened then. It is my internet, most likely. Callie's books have sold in excess of 1 million copies, so they've been #1 on every digital platform going, have been translated into over 25 languages and optioned for television. We're here today to discuss Callie's latest psychological thriller, Strangers, which published in hardback, ebook and audio last Thursday. It is a brilliant, fast-paced mystery about 3 strangers whose lives intersect with terrifying consequences. Callie, welcome to the Avon Book Festival. We are so delighted to have you.
Thank you, Phoebe. You broke up a little bit then, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Thank you for having me, and thank you for anybody watching who's already ordered Strangers and has a copy now.
Thank you, and sorry if I broke up. I'll just carry on, and then if it gets really bad, someone will have to let me know. First of all, can you tell us a little bit more about Strangers and how you came to write the book?
Yeah, so I'm going to get my prop out again now.
It's a good one.
Strangers is about 3 lonely people who were strangers. One's a security guard called Gareth, there's a shop manager called Alice, and there's a kleptomaniac called Ursula. And their lives are very separate, but they collide suddenly when a terrible crime takes place. The book's set in Bristol, and most of the action takes place in a shopping centre.
And I can vouch for the fact that it is an absolutely phenomenal book. It also contains one of my absolute favourite characters of yours, which is Ursula. I know she's one of your faves as well. Can you tell us a little bit why you love Ursula so much and how you came to write her particularly?
Yeah, Ursula was a character that has sort of been in my head for quite a while. I knew I wanted to write about a very, very tall woman. Now, I'm quite a tall woman. I'm 5'11" and a half. But I wanted to write about a really tall woman, like a 6'3" woman. At first, I thought I was going to write a character a bit like The Lives and Lovers of a She-Devil by Faye Weldon. But actually, Ursula's nothing like that. She's much more gentle and kind-hearted. But she was in my head for like several years, and I just couldn't find the right book to put her in. So when I came up with the idea for Strangers, I thought, yes, I can fit Ursula into this book. She could be my kleptomaniac character. But I didn't know what job to give her until there was a knock on my door one day at home, and I answered the door, and this woman was standing there who looked just like I'd imagined Ursula. And she basically handed me a parcel and went, "Could you sign here, please?" And I just kind of gawped at her and signed and took the parcel. And I just thought, that's it. Ursula's going to be a courier. And this woman appeared once more. And I kind of, I really wanted to take a photo of her, but obviously that's kind of rude when someone's just knocking at your door.
A bit of a surprise.
Exactly. Can I just base a character on you? But I kind of memorized a bit what she looks like. And she became Ursula. She was kind of the template for Ursula. But the more I wrote Ursula, the more I began to understand her. And I think at the beginning, readers have certainly told me so far, they're a bit wary of her. They're a bit like, who is she? Who is this weird person that steals from her friends and from shops and stuff? But then as you get to know her, you start to understand why she is the way she is. And actually you feel quite sorry for her and very fond of her, or at least I did.
I did. I'm incredibly fond of her. I love her. I love how tall she is. I love her job. And I love the fact that she is imperfect. I think you're so good at writing those flawed characters. Going on to talk about your whole back catalogue, which of those is your favourite novels to write? So if Ursula is your favourite character, do you have a favourite book out of all the ones you've written?
Yes, The Fear. The Fear is my favourite. Yeah. I think some books are harder to write than others, and some books just kind of slot together. They as you write them, they feel right. The balance feels right. The characters feels right. The balance between action and reflection and that sort of thing, and that book just felt right. For anybody watching that doesn't know what The Fear is about, it's about a woman called Lou, who, when she was a teenager, was groomed by her karate teacher, who then she fell in love with, and he took her away to France. And then I won't give away too much to what happened, but basically the majority of the action in the book takes place 20 years later, when she returns to her hometown and she sees this man who's now out of prison grooming another girl. So it's a three-parter. So it's got Lou's point of view, Chloe's point of view, who is the teenage girl that he's grooming, and this other character called Wendy. And Wendy was a lot of fun to write because Wendy's kind of bitter and vengeful, but she's also quite funny. And just like her little comments and stuff that just kind of jumped into my mind really amused me. And so I really enjoyed writing her, and I really enjoyed, without giving too much away from this for the story for The Fear, I really enjoyed the way that Lou takes control back.
Yeah.
And it was just really satisfying. And then right at the end, when I got the idea for the twist in the last chapter, I was just like, oh, you get, as an author yourself, when you get that idea that just gives you that fizz of excitement,
yeah,
you're like, oh yeah, that's good. And it makes up for the hours and hours of kind of forcing yourself at your desk and getting through the bits that aren't as much fun.
I remember you actually talking to me about that twist right at the end of The Fear and wondering whether we should keep it in or take it out, and we decided to keep it in. I'm really glad we did. But I think it's fair to say there's also a little twist at the end of Strangers. I know not everyone will have finished it yet, but is that a similar situation? Did that come to you later on in the writing process? Did you get that same fizz of excitement when you thought of that?
Yeah, that it seems to have become my new thing. Thinking of a twist right at the very end, which
literally like the last page we're talking.
Yeah. As I get there, or even in the case of The Escape, I came up with an idea for a very final chapter when I was doing the edits with Helen, and I was just like, oh, maybe I could just put this right at the very end, which adds a nice sort of twist to what happens at the beginning of The Escape. And I was like, what do you think? And Helen was like, yeah, brilliant. So then that happened again for The Fear. I got the idea for that final little twist really late on in the book. And then the same for Sleep. I think I was about 5,000 words away from the end. And I thought, oh, I know what can happen right at the very end. And then the same for Strangers as well. I just thought, oh, because they're, okay, I'm going to stop talking, or else I'm going to give it away. But it suddenly came to me. And the thing is as well is now I feel like I have to trust that is my process now.
Yeah.
Just keep writing, and then at some point that final twist will come to me. But it's really scary as I start to get there, as I start to get towards the end of the book. I just think, I haven't got it yet. Oh, I'm going to let all my readers down because there's not that one final twist. But so far it has come with 4 books in a row.
Yeah.
So we will see for the one that I'm writing now what that final little twist will be.
It's exciting. So that brings me on quite nicely to my next question, which is about your writing process. I know you've been a full-time writer for a while now. Can you tell us a bit about your sort of average day? I mean, it might look a little different at the moment, but your normal average day as a full-time writer, what is your process?
Well, it's really changed over the years, because so my first published books were back in 2009, and that was back when I was writing rom-coms.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, I lived alone. I didn't have any children. I had a full-time job. So my writing process back then was basically write as much as I could every evening and in the weekends. These days, so I gave up the full-time job, was it at the end of 2015, I think. So I've been a full-time writer for 5 years. And I have a son now. So my day starts with the school run. And then I sort of come home, spend a couple of hours having my breakfast, chill out a little bit. But in terms of actually plotting a book, so I'll get an idea, something that kind of appeals to me, and then so often it can be like a what if. So what if 3 characters became involved in a crime, and they were all strangers and they had to trust each other, that sort of thing, is how the process typically starts. Occasionally I've had just a character say the first line of a book to me, like The Accident. The first few lines of that, the character just told me them when I was in a supermarket queue, and so I will start with that, and then I will work out what it is that my main character wants. So what's their goal by the end of the novel, what they want to achieve, if they want to escape or find a missing person or whatever that may be. And then I work out what they need. And this is like the emotional arc of the story, the way that the character changes. And often that's something that I don't really realize until I'm writing it. I'll think I'll know, but I only get to know my characters as I'm writing. So that need can change a little bit, but the want pretty much stays the same. And then I brainstorm, I do like spider diagrams and stuff, of all of the kind of obstacles that can get in the way of my character achieving their goal. And I'll also ask why a lot, because if a character acts in a certain way, there has to be a reason why that character acts that way. So I ask why, and I kind of delve into their backstory and their childhood. What is it that gave them this? Because I always give them a flaw as well. I try to give them a flaw that makes it harder for them to achieve their goal. So what is that flaw? Where did that flaw come from, and why? And yeah, so just lots and lots of thinking and brainstorming. And then I have a massive whiteboard, which is to my left here. And I draw it, I use a whiteboard pen, and I draw out the 4-act structure, which has 8 sequence climaxes. And then I use index cards with magnets, because it's also magnetized. And I work out what the sequence climaxes are, so like the big exciting scenes in the book, and a few other scenes. And if I've got 3 characters, I do that for 3 of them. But I leave lots of spaces in between, because I've tried outlining before for other books, and actually it takes a lot of the excitement out of the process. I like to have myself like a roadmap to follow, but enough spaces so that there are surprises, that keep me interested in writing it.
And would you say, no, so fascinating. I think everyone will be bulk buying those whiteboards now. They sound amazing, a magnetic whiteboard. Would you say that there are elements of your characters' backstories that you have in your head but actually don't make it onto the page in the final draft?
Yeah, probably. Like for the book that I'm writing at the moment, I've thought quite a lot about, it's about 2 sisters, but they're born 12 years apart. So they have quite an interesting relationship, and they have quite different childhoods because of that age difference. And I've thought quite a lot about their childhoods. And the chances are a lot of that probably won't make it into the book, But I think to create a rounded character, you need to have that feeling of where they've come from, even if it doesn't end up in the final book.
I think that's so important. I think you do that really well. Like you were saying before, your characters have motivations, and even if it's not spelled out on the page, because you thought it through, the reader knows that they're a real person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so how much would you say your real life influences your books? Do you ever take inspiration from your own life or people in your own life and write those into your novels?
Yeah, so the sort of inspiration for my books has changed over the years. So when I wrote the first 3 books, which was The Accident, The Lie, and The Missing, my inspiration was my own fears. So The Accident, the motivation behind that one was, what if a really nasty ex that you've had comes back to try and destroy your happiness that you've got now? For The Lie, it was, what if friends turn against you or turn your other friends against you? And then for The Missing, it was, what if something happens to your child? So these were all things that I'd either thought or worried about. And then I kind of changed it a bit. So for The Escape, that was inspired by a news story I saw on Avon and Somerset Constabulary's Facebook about a woman on the run with her son. And then obviously the fear was inspired by the story of the schoolgirl who ran away with her teacher to France. And what have we got next? The fear. Sleep. The sleep was more about, I want to write about sleep. For some reason, I just thought, I've always been fascinated about sleep. Sleep disorders, night terrors, insomnia, sleepwalking. Like, it's a whole fascinating subject. So originally with sleep, I wanted to have a 2-parter story where half was in a sleep clinic in the day, in present day, and half was in a hotel. And in my original idea, what had happened in the hotel would be the reason why the characters in the sleep clinic all had sleep issues. But actually, when I came to write the bit in the hotel, it was such a full story that there was no way I could make anything happening in a sleep clinic nearly as exciting. So I ditched the whole sleep clinic bit and just focused on the hotel. But in terms of my own life, when I was writing Sleep, my main character in that Anna has a huge amount of guilt about a car accident that she was involved with, where 2 of her colleagues die. And while I was writing that book, one of my friends took her own life, and the guilt that I felt, for not being a better friend and not being more supportive, I fed a lot of that into the emotions of my character Anna. And ditto with strangers. It's about lonely people. And I've been lonely in my life. I lived in London in my 20s, and I was really skint. My flatmate would often go spend the weekend with his girlfriend, and I felt terribly lonely. And again, in my late 30s, when I moved to Bristol, I only really knew my partner and one other person, and was pregnant with my son. And the sort of feeling of disconnection when you move to a new city and you don't know anyone and you don't know the buildings and the streets and it's all very alien and strange. You draw on those kind of experiences that you've had yourself, which I think helps make the character's experience feel more valid and more real.
I think that's really true, and I think I don't want to spend this whole time talking about the world events, because I want to make it a cheerful episode. But I think it's worth discussing. I think a lot of people at the moment are feeling quite anxious. They might be feeling quite lonely because we're in isolation. Do you think that writing is a way through that? Do you think that people who are out there watching this, maybe feeling a bit low, should take up writing? Do you think they should try and express some of it in a creative way?
I definitely think writing your feelings down and your fears and your worries can be a hugely helpful thing. I mean, I don't write a diary. I kind of wish I had written a diary through this, actually, because I think it would be really interesting to look back on in, you know, in years to come. I know some people are keeping diaries, and actually people are telling children to keep diaries as well. But it's hard enough to get my son to do his homeschooling stuff. Never mind keeping a diary as well. But I would have loved that. When I was 8, I would have loved to have kept. I think I probably had millions of diaries, actually. But you know, I keep a diary. I've got a writing diary because you've never seen it. Because basically the emotions that I feel when I'm writing a book, as you know, because you write books too, but you feel that self-doubt and that fear and that worry, and you think, oh, maybe this book is rubbish. And it's the same in the run up to publication. You start to think, oh gosh, what if this one doesn't sell or people hate it? And what I realized was that my emotional response to writing a book and having a book published was cyclical. So it's the same for every single book. So I thought, if I write it down in a book, then I can look back on it and I can say, oh, I felt exactly the same at this point in the last book, actually. And I do put nice stuff in there as well, sort of moments of celebration and whatever. But it's just a way of me kind of purging any fear or worry that I've got. And I think writing can do that too. If I wasn't a novelist now, I'd probably be writing short stories in this kind of time frame where we are now, just because they're smaller and they are manageable. You know, you can write one in a day or a couple of days. That's not to say, you know, if people have got ideas for a novel, and they've got the time now, absolutely write them, because to lose yourself in that kind of escapist world with different characters where there's no virus and you can go where you want, there's a freedom to that. But equally I understand how preoccupying all of this can be and how much of an overload it can feel. So you know, write it down in a diary, get it all out of your head, and then approach something creative, maybe.
I think that's really good advice. And talking about the period we're going through at the moment, obviously Strangers has just come out. You've had a lot of books published. You've had the ups and downs of publication. Obviously this one has been slightly different, and you've done a lot of virtual events like this. You know, we've been moving things online rather than having the book, you know, all the bookstores are closed, so there are difficulties. How has that been for you? Have you found that you've been able to find positive parts of the publication process anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it was only really, I mean, the amount of events that I do now have increased slowly from my first book. I did used to have them all written down on my website, and I think when the accident came out in 2014, I think I did 3 events in the whole year, or 2 events. Up until, you know, last year, I don't know how many events I did, but it felt like at least 2 a month. It was about 25 or something, plus going to London for meetings and all of this sort of thing. So it almost feels like this. I almost feel like I've gone back in time to my earlier books, when I was doing a lot more stuff online. I mean, the technology wasn't as good as it is now, but back then I was doing lots of blog Q&As and little videos for this and that. So it does feel a bit like stepping back in time. Obviously, because this is my 7th psychological thriller, I've got readers who've read my other books who want to read this one. So I'm in quite a privileged position compared to a debut author, where I've got a mailing list and I've got Facebook followers and Twitter followers, so I can say to them, you know, this is my new book. The issue really, I think, is reaching new readers who might typically walk into a bookshop and just see the cover and pick it up. It's sort of like, how do we reach them? But you know, people are being really kind. A guy I know called Joe from the Bristol short story competition, which I hugely recommend to any short story writers out there. He also runs Bristol 24/7 magazine, writes fiction reviews for them. He introduced me to Caroline, who's a journalist for BBC News, and she did a piece on the book buddy thing that
Yeah, so nice.
that I put on my Facebook, which for anybody watching, if you're reading Strangers and you want a buddy to read along with it, you know, when you get to a certain page, like page 100 or page 200 or whatever, or even at the end, and you want to sort of swap your theories about what's going on or whatever, and then discuss it at the end, like a little mini book group of 2 people. I set up this thing on my Facebook where you could say, yeah, I want a book buddy, and I'd pair you with someone. And I'm still doing it. So if anybody watching it does want a book buddy. Anyway, Caroline from the BBC News picked up on this story and wrote a great piece. So that's a great way of reaching more people. But there's a lot of authors with books out and a lot of authors trying to reach new people. So it is a challenge, absolutely.
It is a challenge, but we rise to the challenge, don't we? I think the Book Buddy is a really nice scheme. We'll make sure that we tweet the link to it after this so that people can find it on the Avon Twitter or on Callie's Twitter. I wanted to ask you, do you share early versions of your work with anyone? Do you share them with your family or your friends or anyone else?
Nope, no one. No. I actually get, if I think as an author, you're at your most sort of vulnerable in terms of your confidence when you're writing your first draft. And all it would take for me to kind of make me doubt what I'm writing is one sort of slightly raised quizzical eyebrow or look of confusion, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't even like sharing what it's about until it's finished, because I have enough self-doubt for myself without, you know, adding
someone
more
else,
to it because somebody's looking at me a bit like, oh, that sounds rubbish. So no, literally I write the whole draft. I show nobody anything until I send it to you and my agent Madeline. And so you are literally the first people who will have seen it other than me. And that's why it's so terrifying because you only have your own reaction to it. But I think the more books that I write, the more I trust my gut instinct. And often when I deliver a book to you, I will know in my gut if it's a bit off, if there's something that's not quite working, or I will feel on reading it back several times, oh, that the beginning's a bit slow. She's going to tell me that I need to work on the beginning and add more tension or whatever. Or if something's not quite right with a character. And earlier on in my career, I would think, oh, maybe I'm just being really tough on myself, and my editor's going to tell me that, you know, actually everything's fine. But no, it's my gut instinct is almost always right now. I instinctively know what's right and what's wrong with a book when I deliver it. But then I run out of time to fix it.
But you probably need that break while I'm reading it so that you can think about it more, and then when we do the edits you're more prepared because you already know what needs fixing essentially.
And sometimes I don't know. I know something's wrong, but not what. I sense that something is wrong, and then, you know, it'll take a comment from you or from Maddie to say, you know, there's too much focus on this, and then I think, that's what, and then I have the difficult process of fixing it.
So that brings me on to my next question, which is obviously we worked together for a while. We go through the editing process together, but other than that, there's so many elements that go into publication. Do you have a favourite part of the publishing process? Is it that moment where your book is out on the shelves? Is it the moment where you sit down to write a first draft? Is it the moment where you send it to me and have a glass of wine?
There are many nice moments of the publishing process, and definitely typing the end, even though we all know the end gets taken out. You know, you never see a book with the end, but as a writer, typing the end, like, and I do it quite bangy with like single fingers, is lovely. But and sending it off is always a relief, because you know you've got a week or two to relax or worry. But no, my favorite part is brainstorming. It's getting that initial idea and that excitement. And I think every time you get an idea for a new book, you think to yourself, this is the one. This is the one that is going to blow everyone away. It's the one that won't get a single 1-star review, and it's just, you know, and it'll go to the top of the charts and stay there for weeks because it's brilliant. And that sense of optimism is amazing, and it doesn't last because it's still there while you're brainstorming and you're planning it and you're lying in bed at night and you're thinking, oh God, I could do this and I could do this. And at that moment, the world is your oyster and you just think, I can't wait to start writing. And then when you actually start writing, you're a bit like, not quite working out how it was in my head. You know, it's very rare for me to have a book that just sort of splurges out and is easy to write. I remember reading an interview with Lisa Jewell where she said her massive bestseller, what's it called? Then she was gone. Then she was gone. She wrote it in 6 weeks, I think.
Did she?
It just came out. She just wrote it, and I would love to be able to be like that. I take labour over every word and second guess myself. Although with my young adult book, my next one, The Island, which is out in January, I wrote 50,000 words of that in November during NaNoWriMo, and that did come out really easily. So, you know, one book in 12.
Going great. Would you recommend NaNoWriMo to people that are listening or watching? Do you think it's a good thing to just have that initiative?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think the November that I did it was the first time I've completed it, or the second time? Okay, I think it might have been the first. I think I might have attempted it but not completed it. But yes, absolutely. It's you have to write like 1,667 words a day for 30 days on the trot, or, you know, double up on one day and have a day off or whatever. And I did do that a bit, actually. I did have a couple of days when I went to visit my parents where I didn't write. But it's the good thing about doing NaNoWriMo is that you completely inhabit the story, because you're writing it day after day after day, and you're thinking about it all the time. So you're always with your characters and you don't have to re-get to know them if you've sort of, you know, taken a week off or whatever and then sat down again. It is exhausting though. I mean, at the end I was just like, oh, but that feeling of satisfaction of writing 50,000 words in a month.
It's amazing.
But I would say plan a lot before you start. You know, I did actually, I've done my edits for that book now. And what I didn't do before I started writing The Island was think about the backstories of the characters, which is what which I do with my adult books. The young adult one, I was so driven by the plot and NaNoWriMo, I just went right in. And so when I got the edits from Emily, my young adult editor, she was like, well, how did these characters get on in the past and what was their relationship? And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. So I had to do it backwards for that, which was weird. But yeah, absolutely. Do NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, that's the good thing about writing, though. You can go back and, you know, you can fill in the gaps afterwards, can't you? So there are different ways of doing it. Do you have any other advice for aspiring writers, people that might be wanting to start a book or might be wanting to finish a book? What would be your top tip?
Right, if you're a lot of people say to me that they want to write a book but they just don't even know where to start, and if you're in that position, I would just think about what it is, the story that you want to tell and why. And I would always say to follow my advice, which is, what is it that your main character wants? You know, there are other ways of writing a story. You know, some people start with a theme and they, oh, I want to explore this. Or some writers literally, you know, I think I'm writing saying Ian Rankin just gathers a bunch of sort of newspaper clippings, looks through to see what sparks his interest, and then just starts writing. I think Lee Child also starts writing without having a plan, which is fine if you're experienced and you know you can trust in that process. But I think most people, you're going to hit a point in the process where you're going to start to stumble, maybe around 20,000 words or maybe around 40,000 words. So I think if you can give yourself even the vaguest roadmap of what my character wants, the end, is she going to get it at the end, which normally she is, but what are all the obstacles? Who is the antagonist that's going to try and stop her? Get how to write books. I have 3 shelves of them in my office, and I've culled quite a lot. I really, on my website, cltaylor.com, if you go through the news section all the way back to, I think it's September 2017. Sorry, there should be an easier way of doing this, but there's a list of all of the how to write books that I recommend. I use Alexandra Sokolov's. I'm just looking to see if I've got it to hand. But
well, we can have a look for it later, and then if you want, we can like write them down and put them onto Twitter.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So how to write books to help give you a structure. So that's if you're just starting. If you have already written something, and you don't feel ready to send it to an agent because you feel maybe it's not quite right, or you've had some feedback off friends or family that say that there's, you know, a bit of an issue, it might be worth paying to get an editorial report. There's loads of different companies that do that, as well as quite a lot of authors, you know, to make a bit of money on the side, will look at manuscripts and do critiques. Again, I can mention to Phoebe some places I know that do that sort of thing. So yeah, that's a good idea. There are also books on how to edit, so you could use those to help you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the best advice would be find the books that you really love in the genre that you want to write, and obviously you've already read them once for pleasure. Read them again to analyze them. It's something that I was told by an agent when I started off in my career, and I actually found the best-selling book in the genre I was writing then, and I went through it with a tooth comb. Every time I laughed, I underlined it, and then every time I desperately wanted to turn the page, I would underline that, and then I analyzed it to work it out. And it's the same with crime, you know.
Yeah.
Why what is the author doing that makes you desperate to keep turning the pages? And you'll start to see a pattern after you've read a certain number of books. And you know, it's not copying, it's not plagiarism, unless you lift lines of text that made you laugh or made you feel scared. That's plagiarism.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. But the devices, you know, cliffhangers at the end of chapters, introducing a new mystery just as another mystery has been solved, having more than one mystery in the plot. I mean, in Strangers, the mystery at the beginning is who is the dead body that Gareth and Alice and Ursula are standing around, and how did they die, and how were the strangers involved, how. But also there are other mysteries that run through the book. So Ursula moves in with a landlord who has a locked basement door that she's not allowed in, and Alice is stalked, and Gareth's mum receives letters from her late presumed dead husband. So these mysteries all add to that sense of, oh, you know, what's going on. And then there's another mystery, which is the harbourside murderer, people being pushed into the river or not. So you need to multi-layer all of the mysteries.
Yeah.
And you need to give the reader just a little bit, not so they don't get frustrated, but they just need to keep solving these sort of mysteries and clues.
Yeah, I think it's about never letting the reader get fully comfortable, isn't it? It's keeping them on their toes.
Yeah.
We have got quite a lot of questions coming in from people that are watching, which is great.
Oh, cool.
So I'm going to start answering some of those. So Ruth says, when you're writing first person, how do you make a man's voice sound convincingly different from a woman's voice? Which is a great question.
Ooh, that's really interesting. I have written from a man's in a man's voice in my books in the past. I'm trying to think how to me it's a bit like acting. You have to become that person. So I don't know that there's a simple way to do this. When I do it, I just become that man and write like that man would speak. Voices are so important. I did an interview with Gillian McAllister and Holly Seddon for their Honest Authors podcast, and one of them said to me, what is so good about your book is that so this is in the third person, strangers, but as you switch between Alice and Ursula and Gareth, they all have a different voice, even though it's in the third person. And I couldn't explain to you exactly how I did that, apart from I just inhabit that character's world. But I have read some books with multiple first person voices and they all sound the same. So you can test yourself. You could lift bits of dialogue and kind of muddle them up and see if you can actually tell the difference
that's a good idea.
Between one character and another, because people have little quirks and you don't want to go overboard, like one character always says whatever it is. But people have different sort of speech rhythms and different things that they're obsessed about or they think about. I'm gonna have to give this one more thought.
It's good. I guess
I actively think about.
Well, you're just embodying the character. It's about trying to get into the mindset of the male or female. So Sharon says, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self that would have prevented some angst? Which I like. Your teenage angst. It says.
Teenage angst.
Yeah.
I think as a teenager, I was mostly just obsessed with whether anybody fancied me or not. So
did, Kelly? Why wouldn't
I would say, don't worry, you will meet some people who fancy you. I had a lot of self-doubt as a teenager. And I wanted to be published from the age of 8, and I did try, and I sent books off to Ladybird publishers and got rejected and stuff. And I always kind of assumed, I absolutely loved reading my whole life, and I always assumed there's no way someone like me could be a writer. So, I might go back to my teenage self and say, it's okay that you like to spend time on your own. You're actually an introvert, so you get your energy from being on your own. You don't have to be the life and soul of the party, because that's other people's jobs and other people's personalities. And it's all right to have hobbies like knitting and drawing and all that kind of. I think basically I would tell teenage me, you don't have to be like everyone else. It's okay to be yourself with the interests that you have.
I think that's really nice advice. And also, you're so good at knitting now. I was like, wow, you're amazing at it. That's obviously paid off. Okay, another question. Lots of people saying congratulations, Strangers is a 5-star read. So that's very lovely.
Thank you, everyone.
So we've got another question from Ruth Kelly. You mentioned you used to write rom-coms. Why did you switch genre to thrillers, and how did you find the transition?
Okay. Yes, so I did write rom-coms as Kelly Taylor, Heaven Can Wait and Home for Christmas.
One of which was made into a film, which is my favourite fact about Kelly.
Yeah, Home for Christmas was made into a film by a little independent Brighton film production company, and that was amazing. Seeing my words, my characters, stuff out of my head come to life, because I actually went to watch the filming. But yeah, so I wrote rom-coms. My plan was probably to keep writing rom-coms, but what actually happened was, so the second one had come out, Home for Christmas had been published. My son had just been born. He was about 6 weeks old when my book came out. And then my agent said to me, okay, can you write a synopsis and 3 chapters? And we will approach our editor to see if we can get you another 2-book deal. So I came up with an idea and I did all of that, and it went off to my editor. And after a little while, she came back and she said, I don't actually want any more rom-coms. What I want is something with more sort of emotional depth, like a Jojo Moyes book, or more of a book club read that, you know, Richard and Judy might put in their promotion. And I was flummoxed, because I wasn't sure how to do either of those things. But about 6 months earlier, I was a member of the RNA, which is the Romantic Novelists Association, which is a fabulous association. And if you do write sort of women's fiction and that sort of thing, do join them, because they're so warm and welcoming and lovely, and they like a glass of wine or 10. But they ran a competition called the Elizabeth Gooch competition, which I entered when I was pregnant. And the challenge was to write a chapter on the theme of keeping a secret. And I'd had this idea. Actually, it was the first line of The Accident, which came to me in a supermarket queue. I was pregnant with my son at the time, so I kind of had that sort of halfway stare thing that you get. But I entered it, and I had the voice from the main character, Susan, telling me about her daughter in a coma and how she deliberately stepped in front of a bus. And I wrote it down, and I entered the competition, and I won. So when I heard from my agent that my editor didn't want any more rom-coms, I could remember the judge, Annie Ashurst at RNA, when she gave me my prize, saying to me 6 months earlier, "What happens next?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "You have to write it. You have to. It's amazing. It's brilliant." And I just thought, well, maybe I'll just do that, because S.J. Watson's Before I Go to Sleep had come out and done really, really well, and I'd listened to that. And Elizabeth Haynes' Into the Darkest Corner, which is my all-time favourite psychological thriller. So if you haven't read it, read it. It's just a masterclass.
I actually haven't. I will. No, I know.
Really?
I will.
Phoebe, yeah. It's a masterclass in tension. It's so good. At the beginning, you're not really sure what's going on because there's like a court transcript, and that almost threw me. But once you get into the body of the story, the main character has OCD and she's always checking locks and stuff. So good. Anyway, that made me think, oh, I feel like psychological thrillers might become a really big thing. And so I was on my maternity leave with my son, and I sat down to write the rest of this book that became The Accident in his naps in the day, and sent it to my agent, and she said, "Oh my God, it's the best thing you've written." And she submitted it, and then Avon published it. So
here we are.
I think I'd always had that kind of dark side to my sort of writing personality, because I started off my career writing short stories, and some of them were really quite dark. So maybe it was fate that I was to switch.
We are very glad that you made transition. You mentioned the there, but we've also had a question from Fiona, who says, "What books do you like to read, and who are your favourite authors? So who are your other favourite authors?"
Ah, cool. I really like to read a range, and actually, at the moment in this job being an author, I'm sent a lot of crime and mostly psychological thrillers. So I probably don't read as widely as I used to, but I am a member of a local book club. So we have all kinds of random, suggestions about what we're going to read each month. So I'll basically read whatever the book club says. So the most recent one was Normal by Sally Rooney. Yeah, but we've read stuff like, a street cat called Bob, and we've read some young adult, we've read some non-fiction. My favourite author my favourite authors are Maggie O'Farrell and Margaret Atwood. The voices of both of them are just superb.
Amazing.
I loved The Testaments last year, because The Handmaid's Tale was one of my favourite books from teenage years. And then I watched all the TV programmes. So to read The Testaments from Margaret Atwood's own hand was just like, it was lovely. My favourite crime author is Belinda Bauer. She writes wonderfully quirky, darkly humorous, in places, but gripping and warm crime novels. I've started her new one at the moment, Exit, which is just brilliant. I can't wait to carry on reading that and finish that. I'm a big fan of, you know, my contemporary psychological thriller authors as well. I won't list them because if any of them see this, they'll be like, why didn't you mention me? But
Probably too
yeah,
many, too many.
there are so many, and they're
Yeah.
all so good. But yeah, there's a lot. I do love a bit of dystopian. I loved The Last. Have you read The Last?
Yeah, really good.
Yes, which is about a bunch of people stuck in a hotel after a nuclear war. I loved it. I just found that fascinating. It's right up my alley.
And do your book club ever read your books, or you're not allowed to suggest?
I would never turn up to my book club after they'd read one of my books. Oh God, no, that would be really cringy. I mean, they do read them separately, but no, that would be my worst nightmare, to sit in a room talking about my book. No thanks.
I also wanted to ask you about your audiobooks. Obviously, actually, we're hoping more people will listen to audio at the moment. You know, more people are reading ebooks because they can't get out to the shops. And I know that your audiobooks are narrated by Claire, so you have a really good relationship with your narrator. Can you tell us about those? Do you like audio? Do you listen to your own books? How's that process been for you?
Yeah, audio. Discovering that my books are in audio has been a delight. The Claire Corbett has been narrating my book since The Missing, which was my third book. And as soon as I heard, I didn't listen to the whole book, but I listened to quite a sample that I was sent of her narrating it. And I just fell in love with her narration style. She's originally from Bristol, but you wouldn't know when she reads a book. But The Missing was set in Bristol, and she does the Bristol accent, and it is so warm and so lovely that I was just like, oh, I felt like she lifts my books from being, you know, entertaining, whatever, to a different, she brings them to life. And to me, she just makes them sound so much better. So when I listen, I'm like, oh, I wrote that. Wow. You know, she's just brilliant. And luckily I got to meet her before all of this happened. I went up to London and listened to her narrating Strangers. And again, Strangers is set in Bristol, so she gets to do her wonderful Bristol accent for all the characters. And you know, those bits that she said, little bits of Ursula, where she just made me laugh. You know, the way she delivered the lines. But yes, I love an audiobook. I'm a kind of recent convert, probably in the last year, and I often listen to them on dog walks, or if I'm walking down to the station to get a train somewhere. I like a mixture of non-fiction and fiction. I loved Found by Erin Kinsley, and I'm really loving John Ronson books at the moment. I'm listening to The Psychopath Test, and I also loved, what was the other one I listened to? Public Shaming, which is partly research for the new book that I'm writing now. So, but yes, I absolutely love an audiobook. And it makes folding laundry and putting it away so much more enjoyable.
Yes, much more entertaining. And yeah, we were talking about one of your rom-coms being made into a film. I know some of your other books have been optioned, some of your thrillers. Do you ever picture who might play your characters? So, for example, in Strangers, have you ever thought about who might play your characters if it came to the screen?
Well, actually, I did a Facebook Live the other day, and one of the games that I was playing with my readers was, I had come up with 3 characters who would play the characters in Strangers, and I sort of blanked out their faces, and then I had to read out 5 clues. So the ones that I actually picked would be so Gwendolyn Christie to play Ursula, because I think she would just do it brilliantly. She's such a good actress. She's great in Game of Thrones. And I've seen her interviewed, and I can tell she's quirky, and she could do a great job with Ursula. Gareth is tricky. I did kind of think Ricky Gervais, actually, if he played a very straight role, he could probably carry him off. But I think when you look at Ricky Gervais, you think Ricky Gervais, so maybe not. So I'd probably go with John Thompson, who was in Cold Feet.
Okay.
Do you know who I mean?
I don't think I know who you mean, but probably lots of people will, and I will Google
Okay.
it afterwards.
I think I've got the pictures. No, I've put them to one side. Or somebody else suggested Martin Freeman, you know, who was in The Office.
Yeah, I like him.
I could kind of see that. And then for Alice is the tricky one, because Alice is like 5'4", red-headed, and I was just and 46, and I was just kind of struggling to think of anybody who would fit that.
I'm trying to think of redheads. Amy Adams, redhead, isn't she?
Yeah, but
not the right age though.
The trouble is, so many actresses are really beautiful, and I would want somebody with a more characterful face.
Yeah.
Gillian Anderson, somebody is suggesting. I just saw that pop up.
I love her. Yeah,
yes, I love Gillian Anderson a lot. Yeah, I think she'd be good. Yeah. She's really good in Sex Education. I'm watching that at the moment.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah,
she's so quirky. I love it.
We have not got long left, but I'm just going to ask one last question because it's a good one. So Casey says, hi Callie, when you get the surge of an idea, like in the supermarket queue, do you rush to note it down somewhere, or do you just keep the idea in your head until you can get back to your computer?
I have to write it down with that particular bit. So I can still remember it. It's coma. There's something innocuous about the word, soothing almost, in the way it conjures up the image of a dreamless sleep. Because, and this is in like 2012, because I kept repeating it over and over and again in my head while I was in the queue. And then when I got home, I literally just dumped my shopping, got a piece of paper, and I just wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And I just kept writing until I'd finished that chapter, because I don't trust myself to hold stuff in my head and remember it later. And the same, I have a notepad and pencil by my bed. Often, if I'm sort of in the planning stages of a book, or if I've got an issue, that a plot problem I'm trying to solve, it'll pop into my head just as I'm falling asleep, and I have to write it down. Even if it's dark, I will write it down in the dark, because I don't trust myself to remember the next day.
That's interesting. So would you recommend for people to do that? Would you recommend people keep a pen and paper with them, or have like an app on their phone so they can write notes?
Yeah, so I mean, now I've got a better phone than I had back in 2012. I actually use the notes facility in my phone quite a lot if I suddenly have an idea and I'm out and about. But I do carry a notebook and pen in my handbag everywhere I go as well.
Very handy to have.
Yes.
And you have so many great ideas, as has been proven by your amazing track record. We are basically out of time, so I just want to say one more thing, which is obviously that you guys can buy Strangers now. It is out as of last Thursday. You can get it in Tesco. There it is. Callie is displaying it beautifully. You can get it in Tesco, Asda, all the main supermarkets, not Sainsbury's, because Sainsbury's are focusing on essential items at the minute. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Waterstones, who have been really supportive. They've been featuring Callie all over the place, which is great. And yeah, wherever you buy your books, make sure you keep safe whilst you're doing so. But it really is an amazing read, and we are super proud to be publishing it. Callie, do you have anything you just want to say to your readers and to people that are watching?
I want to say thank you so much for tuning in and watching and answering questions, and for all your support. Really, this is a strange, isolating time for all of us, and it's been so lovely getting messages from people who are enjoying all of this online stuff. So yeah, I hope you find more of this kind of thing around. There is plenty of it. As well as Avon Fest, there's Stay at Home Festival. And I'm going to try and do maybe once weekly, maybe once fortnight, Facebook Lives on a Friday night on my page. So if you don't already follow me on Facebook, I'm Callie Taylor Author. So look me up. And thank you for coming along today.
Definitely do. I think Facebook Lives are a brilliant idea. What better way to spend a Friday night in lockdown than a Facebook Live? I also just want to remind you that you can find out more about Avon on our website, avonbooks.co.uk. And as I said at the beginning, if you are a writer, then please think about sending us your manuscript in the next few weeks. We are open to submissions. You do not have to have a literary agent to submit to us through the website. So please send us your stories, and you might be sitting here with me in a year's time talking about your book. All right, thank you so much everyone for listening, and thank you to Kelly for coming along. And remember that you can buy Strangers now, and it's an amazing book. Thank you everyone. Bye.